Okay, I am here with Lance today, and I will just let Lance kind of describe a little bit about himself. Specifically, what is it like to experience life the way that you do, Lance?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think to use a metaphor, a lot of times life for me is like constantly working the world's just an immense number of mathematical calculations. Even when I'm connecting with people and when I'm uh, or when I feel like I am connecting on what I would call an emotional level, a lot of that is still metaphorically, it's still using the part of my brain that I would use for conducting some sort of mathematical calculation.
So,
Um, Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. So I had somebody once describe it to me as if they have just a bunch of Excel spreadsheets open for everything in their life. Is
Yep,
that?
yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't mean it literally. There's not actually an Excel spreadsheet there, but yeah, and
Except for the people who actually do have an Excel spreadsheet.
well, I did have a couple Excel spreadsheets for certain things, just to kind of keep track of things or whatever. But most of
Yeah.
it, I mean, you're mostly able to kind of just keep in your head. But have you noticed, first of all, like when did it start being this way for you? And then has it gotten more difficult to live like this as your brain has gotten older?
Yes and no. I kind of feel like it's a matter of turning calculations and turning mental exercises into more of a muscle memory. Um, and so on the one hand, I've actually gotten a lot better at connecting and being able to empathize. I've also had over the years, I've had multiple experiences where I actually did experience legitimate unconditional love for someone, where I recognized that, oh, this is what everyone else is talking about. In those cases, yeah, it's actually gotten a lot easier. On the other hand, I've become a lot less patient with hiding my own personality and hiding who I am. So, uh, so that kind of, so as much as I became more capable of empathizing with people, I also became, for lack of a better term, less interested in empathizing with other people.
Hmm.
So it's kind of been a catch 22.
So I love this. Let's first kind of like talk about like your first comment about feeling love for people. Like, what did it feel like before, and what kind of prompted the feelings of love? Speak as generally as you want.
I'm thinking about that. The first time I truly felt real, genuine love for someone, uh, I only recognized, I had always thought previous to that that I had loved someone or I had felt genuine love for them, regardless of whether it was romantic or not, or platonic. Um, I had always felt degrees of strong feelings, but then the one day when I felt something really truly strong, when I really felt that true love for someone, um, it was like Plato's cave. I looked back and I was like, holy crap, nothing I had felt prior to this was even remotely could even remotely be considered love. I don't know if that makes sense, and I only understood it retroactively.
Can you say like what was the circumstance? Was it like romantic love or familial love, or was it just a moment, or now you still feel that same love for this person?
So the first time was actually my child. That's a pretty easy one. The day she was born, I looked into her eyes and all of a sudden, suddenly there was that thing, that magic that people talk about, and the magic was real for me. Um, the next time I felt it for a specific person, and I would call it quasi-romantic. There's not really a better term for it. But in that situation, it was sort of a complete surprise to me. I just woke up one day and realized, holy crap, I really love this person. And, uh, and I sort of, actually, it was a little bit, I don't know if it was terrifying, but I had never really, like, that was kind of a new experience for me. So I was really out of my depth.
When you say kind of out of your depth, again, like I don't want to push too much,
Sure, sure.
but like what, either the circumstances were kind of out of your depth, or your capacity to understand your own emotions or process them, or they didn't have, or you didn't know how to express them, or there wasn't a good means of expression, like kind of what do you mean there?
All of that, yes. And I don't mean that facetiously. Yes, all of that. I didn't know. I didn't know how to process what I was going through. I didn't know what the hell to do about it. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know. It was just it was a complete paradigm shift, and I was completely at a loss.
And maybe let's just skip to the end a little bit. Was it happy ending or sad ending?
Uh, it was happy enough. The best part about that one is, because of its quasi romantic nature, I took some time to sort of vet or to go through my own evaluation process. And as that particular person, we ended up staying friends, um, even though, nothing ever really happened between us. But, and in that particular case, as I got to know that person, I also started to recognize how genuinely not compatible we were. And that's the thing, is when it first happened, I thought, holy crap, this must be what true love is. Therefore, this must be the right person. I had no idea that you could just feel that with people. And so it took me a good long time to go through the process of understanding that person, realizing they were not really compatible. And even if we had stayed together or gotten together, it probably would have ended up being a terrible idea. So in the end, I was able to win a very valuable friendship, and learn more for myself what unconditional love is really like, and what do you do with it. That was pretty cool. It was a great experience.
Yeah, I love this for you. I'm so glad you had this experience. I'm like a little bit curious because it kind of parallels some experiences I've had and kind of talked to people a little bit about. So I'm just going to probe just a little bit more on this one, if you
Sure.
don't mind.
No, this is
Uh,
cool.
so would you kind of describe it? So you did feel like it was unconditional love, not like a crush or an obsession.
Yes. In fact, it was more unconditional love than it was crush and obsession. There
Mm,
were, there was very much a crush element to it. There was also an obsession element to it that I worked really hard to try and control. And the reason I tried to control it was because I had experienced this deeper, more unconditional love, where I was like, I actually care about this person, so I'm going to regulate my own behavior a little bit more.
So this is a little bit interesting. Do you think that the unconditional love you felt, it prompted you to want to be a little bit more careful with this
Yeah.
person, but do you think that it also facilitated you being more careful?
Yes, I think I'm trying to understand. If I understand your question correctly, yes. In other words, because I felt actual unconditional love for this person, did that sort of inspire me to be a better person? And I kind of stepped up my game. Is that what you're trying to say?
A little bit, yeah. So Arya, my girlfriend, she says sometimes that before maybe she started going to therapy ish, right around there, she didn't really see other people, not as whole people, just as real as she is. You know,
Sure.
And then through therapy and through whatever other ways, and I've talked to other people who are like, through like mind enhancing drugs, reality altering drugs, they've had similar experiences where they've had almost like this epiphany that other people are just as real as they are. And so I guess was was that like at all a part to this? And if so, did that help you to be more careful with her?
Yes, it did help me. For me, I think I reached that particular kind of epiphany a little bit earlier in my life. Whether that changed my behavior or not, it's another story. But in this particular case, it was, yes, this is a real person, and this one is special, and I really value this one. And
Yeah.
so, because I valued that person, I I don't know. It just sort of, it's weird. It just makes you a better person. You just sort of step up to the plate naturally, I guess.
Yeah, it is. I guess I can see that. it kind of reminds me, did you ever, like, in elementary school or whatever, read like the story of Helen Keller?
Yeah, yeah.
For whatever reason, I was completely fascinated with the fact that she could spell words. She was like doing the words, talking all this other things, except she didn't understand it. She was just kind of parroting back stuff until, I guess, is it, what's her name, Anne something, her teacher, Anne Sullivan,
Okay.
put her hand underwater, and while she was like pumping water into her hand, spelled water. And then Anne Frank, or not Anne Frank, sorry, what is her name? Blind
Helen
deaf.
Keller.
Helen Keller, thank
Yeah.
you. Too many names to try to remember. Helen Keller suddenly had the epiphany. She's like, oh, these things mean something. This is like, so have you ever had like that experience where you were just kind of like, okay, an epiphany, that people, if it wasn't this, maybe what was the earlier time in which you were like, okay, other people are just as real? Or if you didn't experience this, then, feel free to be like, I didn't
No,
experience
I
this.
did. I experienced it a couple of times, and I can think of a couple of times in my childhood early on. Like I remember, it was just this random moment. I remember in grade school where, and I think I can even remember the kid's name, but we were in phys ed class as third graders, and we were basically running back and forth doing some sort of weird sprint drill in the gym. And this kid next to me, who was a friend of mine, he was just standing there, and I remembered looking at him from the side and seeing the his eyeball, seeing the light refract through his eye from the side, and looking at it, and I just realized, holy crap, he's a real human being just like I am,
Hmm.
right? And I remember that stuck with me for forever. Um, and then I also had other experiences, like when I played football in high school, and you get so used to tackling people, and tackling people can kind of be a little bit violent. And every once in a while, you lose track of what's going on. Next thing you know, some kid goes down because you hit him too hard, and he gets carried off on a stretcher, or just gets helped off the field. And there's that moment where you're like, oh shit, that guy's remember. Oh, we got to remember, they're not just robots; they're real people too. You
Right.
know.
Yeah. So you felt the love for your daughter, you felt love for this woman, and it wasn't the kind of obsession, but you've had obsession crushes before.
Oh yeah, this sucked.
Yeah. Man, one time, if this person's listening, I bet they're not, because they probably don't even remember who I am, but it was after law school. It was not during law school, but it was one of my law school classmates that I had almost nothing to do with. And then it was just hit so hard, and it like lasted for a couple years, and I was like, this is miserable. I don't know why we get that way. Do you?
Nope, I don't know. I think maybe it's some sort of hyper focus. I don't know. It and I kind of, like, part of me a long time ago thought of doing some sort of like apology tour, where I sort of just went to people and said, man, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was such a mess back then. But yeah, I had those, and luckily I've learned how to, like, see it coming, recognize it, and shake myself out of that.
Yeah.
Um, or at
It's
least
interesting.
I'd like to think that.
Yeah, it's interesting about the apology tour because, I cannot go back to kind of like the same halls that I roamed in college without kind of being like remembering a gajillion things, all these ways that I kind of mistreated people. Luckily, by law school, I don't feel like I probably mistreated people, although, maybe some people disagree, and I'm happy to apologize now, for it. But Aria is the same way. She cannot go back to the city, her college town, without she says it's like there are ghosts and demons there. Do you feel
Yeah.
that way?
Uh, mm, I don't know. Maybe more about my high school era than college.
Hmm.
Yeah, probably that. But I've done a pretty good job of avoiding that sort of thing. I kind of, no one's really calling me home, so um, I don't know. Like, okay. So I would say that there's a little psychology game you can play. It's a really lame trick. It's probably something you can find on Facebook too. Um, but there are these little tricks that can that you can play, and one of them is this thing that tells you what you subliminally or subconsciously, how you think other people perceive you. And in that particular little exercise, I always drew a blank. And to be honest, my number one mental blind spot above all is that I have absolutely no idea how other people perceive me. I cannot figure it out. I think there's a reason. I think the reason is because I constantly really don't know how I perceive myself. So I can't conceptualize how someone else would be able to perceive me either, or at least perceive me accurately. But either way, I walk around with this total gap in the ability to even conceptualize how someone else would perceive me. So I tend to kind of avoid that thing of, hey, what if I went back? What would I be facing?
Mm.
I have no idea how to even imagine what I would face, you know.
But to kind of like I identify with it, but to kind of like push back to kind of get you to explain a little bit more for people who don't experience this. Like, I mean, you must know when people have like a crush on you, or you must know when you've like made a good impression, like these types of things.
Sure, in the sense that, someone who I get along with is, I'm building a good rapport, and they seem to be agreeable, and they're doing all the behavioral things that you would expect from someone who, for lack of a better term, likes you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But whether that's sustainable and whether or not that's sincere, I'm constantly questioning, because I just don't have a really strong sense of that.
So let's kind of talk about a little bit. You say that maybe the reason why you have a hard time conceptualizing how other people see you is because you have a hard time. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of conceptualizing yourself. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
I'm not sure what else to say. I'm sorry. That might, but, I swear, didn't I read that in some of the research that people who fall on the spectrum of this particular sort of condition, they have a really hard time with self-reflection, right? Or self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes wonder if that's my version of experiencing that. Plus, I also have to admit, I'm a very evolving person, and I've always been a bit of a social chameleon. And so, as someone I'm very comfortable with self-evolution and self-redefinition. I actually discovering the new person I am after enduring hardships and crucibles and personal tests or whatever. Um, so since I recognize my own inner self is almost constantly evolving, it's very difficult for me to think that someone else on the outside, if they really understood how much evolution is really happening internally, how they would ever draw a conclusion of what the static definition of me is.
Right. Yeah. I don't know you. It's so I intentionally try not to give you leading questions about this until I just like hear your what guided answer. But I've had like this kind of deep and abiding kind of belief slash theory that like most of the symptoms, most of the characteristics of sociopaths or psychopaths. Somebody once said the antisocial personality disorder family, right? Just to kind of
Sure.
make it more generic, that most of them come from a very weak sense of self. And that, like all personality disorders, there's some issue with the way that you view your identity and your concept of self. So like borderline, they're the most extreme chameleons, right? They're like, okay, wherever they are, they kind of take on the characteristics of
Mm-hmm.
wherever they are, without kind of realizing. I mean, we do too, but I think we're almost a little bit more Machiavellian and self-aware about it. Not completely, but so they kind of are that, and then a narcissist would have the false sense of self that he or she portrays to outsiders, which is of
Right.
perfection and superiority. And then the internal sense of self, which is one of like deep shame and inferiority, right? And then you
Okay.
have like the different personalities. I mean, that's why they call it personality disorders, right? Is you have like some kind of weakness. You're unable to maintain, a healthy personality kind of at all times, I guess, right? And I think
Right.
the kind of thing that characterizes people who are more sociopathic and personality disordered is just this very weak sense of self, you know? And so it leads to a lot of issues. I think kind of that you can identify. Number one, kind of you mentioned like being a social chameleon, because it's like, well, you know, somebody says be yourself. Do you know what that means to you?
It means you damn well better be careful, because when I'm myself, you might not like what happens. I don't know.
Let's talk
You
a
know
little
what I
bit
mean?
about that. What do you mean by that?
Like, okay, so one of the things that is it's been an interesting challenge for me as I've gotten older, as my filter between my brain and my mouth has gotten worse and worse and worse. And so, like, there are times when, I'm sitting there, and actually, this going back to, I'm going to answer this in a really roundabout way. Going back to what I was saying about social interactions as an exercise in mathematical calculation or mental calculation. Um, when I get really stressed, certain quote unquote programs start to fall apart. Right?
Mm,
I actually start to swear a lot more. I start to emotionally eat sometimes. When I'm super stressed, I listen to really uh, loud heavy metal. Um, and I start to get really snappy, and all these things start to fall apart. Um, Likewise, and those are just general traits that I'm sitting there going, okay, I know these traits are bad for business. They're not really helpful. Some of them are helpful in the rare circumstances where the context of the situation has changed, right? If you're in a situation where someone's threatening you, it's a good move to start swearing and yelling, right? Because it just sets them off. It sets them off balance.
right.
But in a normal situation where, I don't know, I'm imagining in my mind, bring me to a cocktail party, right? Well, I'm going to put my cocktail party face on, because I know how you're supposed to behave in a cocktail party. Um, if you want me to behave who I really am in that cocktail party, then what you're really at, I'm going to have to ask, wait a second, when you say that, are you expecting that what I want falls within the parameters of what's expected at a cocktail party, right? So you
Hmm.
better be careful, because if you're going to invite me to act according to my own interests and according to my own inclinations, right? That may not fall within what you expect at a cocktail party.
Right.
I don't know. Is that a little too formulaic for an answer?
No, that's like actually really great. So it kind of like ties in a little bit to what you said really early on, is that as you have kind of started feeling more empathy and kind of, is it safe to say kind of a more, I mean, like open to the world, like maybe even a little bit of vulnerability to the world to the extent that you are more open to the world?
Kind of, yeah. That's a
Yeah.
way of putting it.
So do you think, and then you said that you have kind of correspondingly gotten less interested in masking or, pretending to
Yes,
be something other than who you are?
right.
So is that kind of related? Is like you now, like if you were to be yourself at the cocktail party, you feel like people might not like that?
Yeah, pretty much. But then
So
again, maybe they will. Like, it's all of a sudden, it now becomes a gamble. It becomes I guess you want to consider it a calculated risk, or a matter of managing the risk, right?
mhm.
I'm just like, okay, do you want me to mouth off to the hostess? Do you want me to say the smart aleck comment that's coming immediately to my brain? You
Yeah.
know, you want me to share the joke that first popped in my mind? Like, really, you have to be careful when you say, yeah, hey, will you just be yourself?
It's interesting you say it's kind of a calculated risk or gamble too, because I spoke with this woman once. She's talking about how she was like on a train, like she was traveling on vacation, somewhere in Europe or something. And she's talking to this guy who's like obviously drunk or high or something. And, like an hour into it, this person sitting like right next to her, an hour into it, he accuses her of being a sociopath, but kind of very friendly. Like he's like, you kind of sound like a sociopath, or, you may want to consider, that you might be a sociopath, kind of like this. And that was the first time she had kind of heard the term applied to
Sure.
her. And, it like reminded me of my own experience. Like the first time I heard the term or kind of understood it to apply to me was also, from like a different person. But I just thought, of course she wouldn't be masking anything or pretending if he's like drunk or high, to the extent
Right.
that she thought that he was. And he's a stranger on a train on her vacation, like it kind of has all the ingredients for she's just not going to pretend around him.
Hmm.
She also kind of said she ended up divorcing her spouse after many years of marriage, and she kind of said that again, that the reason why is she just got sick of pretending all the time, and she just said life is too short to pretend all the time.
Yeah. That's I can understand that. Yeah.
So what are your plans to do with like this, now that you've changed a little bit and you don't like pretending as much?
That's, I don't know yet. I think I'm making it up as I go.
Uh-huh.
Um, I recently reflected that so for me, I didn't really realize, quote unquote, that I was on the spectrum at all until my mid 30s. Um, and when I did, I sort of had this daydream. This, like, for me, wanting to feel normal has always been something that I've craved like all the time. Right? It's crack cocaine for me. And so my initial reaction to this self discovery was, I want to reprogram myself to become normal. I want to feel like a real human being. I want to feel like a part of that. Um, and and that was several years ago. And one day I sort of woke up and realized, you know what? I don't actually want to become a better human being. I want to become a better sociopath. And the reason is because I have talents and skills that are valuable and unique and kind of cool. And it's not about a matter of shutting those down because of their potential for negative impact. It's about mastering them, controlling them, making them a part of who I am in a way that contributes to my surroundings and to the society around me. Um, yeah, so I want to be, I don't know, I don't have a plan, but I think my goal is I want to be a better sociopath,
And
for
are
lack of a
you,
better term.
yeah, are you at all afraid though? You just talked about calculated risk of being more yourself. Are you afraid of what that might look like?
That has never really occurred to me, honestly. It never occurred to me that I would be uncomfortable with growing more into this, if that's what it
Yeah,
sounds like what you're saying.
and I don't think you should, but do you want to say
No,
why it never occurred to you?
I don't give a fuck. I mean, I say that with love, right? But no, I don't
Right.
care. Like, I want, this is like, if I really wanted, like, what's the consequence? What's the downside?
It's, yeah, what is the consequence? It's a good question, because when you kind of, and I think that's what people kind of don't understand, like, I think it was just like the last, maybe the penultimate one, the weiwei interview, if people are like listening to this. Weiwei kind of talks about how when she was a child, she realized very early on that whatever she was repulsive to other people, that people were repulsed by it, and that she quickly learned to just pretend to be something else.
Yeah. So that, okay. So let me draw another analogy. One time I was waiting in line at this place, and these two women who were slightly younger than myself were chit chatting, and I was not paying attention to anything. I was just sort of absorbing this space around me. And then they accidentally caught my attention. And one of them, like, they were both sort of looking at me. They had exactly enough social, self-awareness to be totally caught in the act, but they were both looking at me. And the one of them says, well, what about him? And the other girl looked at me and she said, ew, no, he's totally not, he's totally not hot enough.
Dang
Now,
it.
I don't even know what the consequence, but here's the thing. both of these girls were basically trolls straight out of Mordor. They were not attractive in any way, shape, or form. And I'm sitting there thinking, what in the world makes you think that I'm even going to feel bad about being rejected by you? And there's a part of me that let's call this the sociopathic part of me that feels the same way about incorporating with general society. I look around me and I see a whole lot of dumbasses, and I keep thinking, why, after so many years of thinking I want to be normal, I'm looking around going, why do I actually feel bad about being negatively judged by this?
Yeah.
Um, which is completely incongruous with my expressions about unconditional love and all that kind of stuff. And maybe that's just because I experience unconditional love on a very individual basis.
Yeah.
But when it comes to humanity as a collective organism, I don't give a crap about being one of the cool kids.
Yeah. So if you don't give a crap about being one of the cool kids, again, all these questions, I feel like I understand what you're saying, but I
Sure.
want other people to understand what you're saying. Why did you care about being normal?
So I don't know why. It was just an internal thing that I just really, really wanted to be normal. Um, I don't, honestly, I don't know. Maybe it's I'm just taking a stab in the dark here, but maybe it's that good old fashioned human nature of being, what's the word? Not agrarian. What is it? Oh, crap. Where you want to be part of the whole, you know? We
Yeah.
crave being with other people. And as much as I'm bored, as much as I may be introversive, I still really crave other people.
So you've said, okay, you crave other people, and then you've also mentioned something else that seems like an actual personal preference. You said that you want to be kind of productive in the world. You said something, or you wanted to like make the
Yeah.
world like a little bit better. So these you do have like these personal preferences, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you
Um,
identify any other personal preferences you're aware of that you have?
in what sense?
Just any.
I well, I tend to be a kind of guy who needs a little bit more context first. I'm not really even sure how to answer that. Okay, so I think it would go back to, now granted, I am Christian, and I'm a strong believer in Christianity, and so for me, part of my desire to part of my desire to be a positive impact on the people around me is driven by my desire to be a good Christian. I'm not looking for your approval. I'm looking for Jesus's approval, for lack of a better, to make it a little bit in a simplistic way. Um, and in that sense, yeah, it does matter to me. Fast and interestingly, in line with that, it's been my experience as I practice the Christian faith and live the gospel that I have positive spiritual experiences that I feel have made me a better person and have made me closer to God, so to speak. And so my desire to be a good influence or to have a good impact on the people around me is, on the one hand, it's non-altruistic. It's a goal. It's an ends to it's a means to an end. On the other hand, it's also a result of the inspiration and positive experiences of having lived the Christian gospel. So kind of, you know,
So I mean, people will want to know. This is the only reason why I am probing again.
sure.
But is it fair to say then, or not fair to say, that the reason why you kind of adhere to the tenets of Christianity is because it kind of works for you? Like, is it
Yes.
kind of outcome oriented, like, okay, this works for you, so it's just like optimal.
Yes, but not in an entirely utilitarian way. For me, Christianity was a very didactic experience. What I'm trying to say is that for me, the spirituality of Christianity is a very real phenomenon. I have had what I can only call very real spiritual experiences, right? I personally can't deny the reality of those experiences. I may not be able to explain them in perfectly empirical terms. In fact, I choose not to use empirical terms to talk about those things. Um, so for me, Christianity is a part of reality, and so here I am forced to face the reality of God, and I do. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, God's real, whether I like it or not, and I'm going to have to deal with that. So how do I deal with it? How about I serve him, right? And Christianity is the mechanism by which I serve God. Or another, probably more agnostic way of saying it is, Christianity is the vehicle through which I harmonize my life with the very real phenomena that I've experienced, very real spiritual phenomena.
Yeah, I like that way of putting it. So you're
I
essentially
hope that
saying,
made sense. I hope that wasn't too hippy dippy.
no, no. So you're like, reality's XYZ, and then to ignore the fact that reality's XYZ would be to kind of live like these people who are like, out of touch with reality, is what you're saying.
Right. Right. So yeah, so God is real. Not harmonizing with him is stupid. For me, Christianity is the best way to harmonize with God. Therefore, that's what I'm going to do. And as a result, because I'm more in harmony with God, um, then that makes me a better person. And as a better person, I find that internal desire, or that internal impetus to actually be a good person and be a positive influence on the people around me.
Now, has anyone ever given you flack within Christianity about your approach to religion?
No one's, well, they've struggled to do so. Some people have criticized my approach. Most of those people, most people have a hard time. Most people just tolerate me. In my own social circles of, within my, my religious social circles, most people just sort of tolerate me and accept that pretty much I just do whatever the hell I want, and it's up to Jesus to judge me or something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there have been some times when someone has said, hey, I don't really approve of such and such and such and such. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I wish you the very best of luck.
Mm-hmm. Good for you.
Thanks.
So, I mean, how does it feel though when you are just, because it sounds like you're okay being pretty true to your own beliefs when it comes to religion. Do you feel like you're okay being true to yourself, your beliefs, you feel free to be your own person outside of religion?
Free to be my own person outside of religion. Well, let me put it this way. I was talking, this is something I think I shared with you in an email once, where God's reality gives me the metaphorical direction of true north, right? Because God is real, I have a sense of what I would call true north, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm pointing my proverbial boat true north. It means I know where true north is, right? So
Mm.
within the context of the Christian gospel, I sit there and I make a decision on how I'm going to behave. I try my very best, at least, to make the best decision I can. If it falls completely in line with everybody's rules, then there's no problem. If it doesn't fall within completely in line with everybody's rules, then I more or less sort of go, well, hey, that's what the atonement is all about. That's why Jesus paid for our sins, right? I'm not I'm not deliberately exploiting the atonement. I'm just recognizing I'm making the best decision I can, and and this is what I've got to work with.
So you do apply that then? You would apply that
And
to
so
like your relationships, your, like your daily life or something. You cut somebody off and you're like, well, like you feel like free being yourself because of the atonement, or because, your religion says that it's okay to not conform to, exactly what everybody else is expecting of you? Or do you still feel that pressure to conform to people's expectations for you? Like, the cocktail party
I
you.
think there's an underlying assumption that being myself is not the same, is not in. Oops, I think we've got some overlap.
Sorry, I think it just like slowed down a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, you were talking in slow motion over me while I was answering your question. It was awesome. Um, I think there's an underlying assumption that being myself is not actually in alignment with the rules of the gospel, right? And I would say 99% of the time it is in alignment. Those times when it's not in alignment, I've discovered I'm discovering a version of Christianity for myself that could, because I don't have a better sense, I don't have a better term for it. I'm discovering an almost sociopathic version of Christianity in which I don't suffer from guilt morality and I don't suffer from shame morality. So without shame or guilt, how do I quote unquote repent? How do I absolve myself of my sins? And the answer is, hey, I recognize that when I sin, it takes me away from my ultimate goal of being in harmony with God. And if I want to be in harmony with God, I'd better figure out how to fix that. um, on the other hand, it also relieves me of any anxiety when faced with paradoxical situations. Those situations where you're like, hey, there's no such thing as a good choice, I have to make one bad choice or another. I'm like, hey, cool, all right, I'm going to make one of those bad choices and move on. Why? Well, because that's what I was working with, and it's not like I tried to make that situation happen. So I'm going to do the best I can and rely on the atonement of Christ to account for that weakness.
Yeah, I get it. So I guess my kind of question is, what does this have to do with like, uh, you know, passing, pretending to be something that people expect to see like at cocktail parties? Is there a connection in your mind between those two, or is it just like, no, it's just like being polite or something? You act that way because that's kind of what's expected of you.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good question. Phrase that question again so I can kind of take another angle at it.
Yeah, so I'll kind of like back up and explain what I mean by being polite. When somebody says, "How are you doing today?" you say, "Good" or "Fine."
Yep.
You don't like get into the details,
Right.
because that's just like in order to deal with people, especially I think for empathetic people, probably like if everyone just kind of like said what they're really feeling all the time, I think there's kind of like this expectation or perhaps understanding that's a little bit too much. We already talk about like burnout in the healthcare profession with therapists or something. They get burnout because they do listen to that so often. We certainly speak about it in the legal profession. In fact, they suggest that that's why we have a higher incidence of alcoholism. We have to take special courses about it, because that is like a professional hazard, I guess, right? So instead, we're polite, we kind of filter ourselves for politeness. So when the person at the grocery store asks, how are you doing? We just say we're good. We don't get into it. But we're different with like somebody who's an intimate of ours, somebody who's a closer relationship. If we were just being polite with them, then we would be masking, right? If we say, hey, we're
Sure.
doing good. My dad, I always tell people, like, watch out if somebody says like, how are you doing, and he says, I'm loving life, it means he's really white knuckling, like he's really
Okay. Yeah.
struggling. That's
He's
kind
just
of,
got that, sweet sarcasm going on.
well, it's not even sarcasm. It's like he's trying to almost convince himself. He's like, this is
Ah.
fine. It's like that dog in the
Mm.
burning building. This is okay. That's what he's doing. And he's not
Yeah.
really confronting the fact that he's so stressed out, that he can't like hardly stand it. He's not sharing with anybody himself, he's not even acknowledging it himself, kind of thing, right? So, I guess there's kind of a difference between like the politeness but maybe you kind of think that like cocktail party behavior is just politeness and that nobody really wants you to be your true self. Like, but I guess like in what situations, maybe this is a better
Mhm.
question, in what situations do you feel comfortable being your true self? Because as you've said, you've just given me a justification for how, you don't need to be
Yeah.
anything but.
Well, so I think there's a little bit of a paradox in my perspective. On the one hand, let's take the cocktail party. I'm going to the cocktail party to get something I want.
Hmm.
Being who I am, well, getting what I want is me being who I am. Um, how I behave around other people is nothing more than navigating the social pathways to get what I want. So if it's the hot chick in the red dress at the bar and I want her phone number, I'm going to navigate the room in such a manner that I can ultimately get that girl's phone number,
Yeah,
right?
I get it.
So it doesn't matter. Now, when someone says, "Well, why don't you just be yourself?" Okay, are you inviting me to cross all the social pathways, all those rules of yours? Are you like, what are you doing when you say you want me to be myself? It doesn't matter what happens. I'm just going to go get that girl's phone number, right? Well, um, you know, uh, how do I get that? Do I do that while navigating, while respecting the pathways that your little social situation has established? Or are you going to are you going to give me a pass and let me just go break all the rules and go get the number,
Hmm. So, I mean, I used to think
right?
this way completely. Like I thought I'm not like necessarily like a tangible thing, like a consistent thing, like a fixed thing. We sometimes say like in law, like in
Yeah,
copyright law. I'm not a fixed thing. I am instead like a process, you
right.
know. I am like photosynthesis or something. I'm not
Yes.
any particular leaf. I am that process of photosynthesis. So I totally get that. Uh, do you think though kind of the way you talk about it, uh, and then we can like kind of get off this a little bit, probably beating this a little bit dead horse. The way you talk about it, you kind of I think there seems to be like
Sure, sure.
you think there's an inherent conflict between like being yourself and like the social kind of rules. You can hear a helicopter in the background.
I think there can be a conflict between the self and the social rules because, and this goes back to, I think this is something you wrote in your book that, broadly speaking, I hate to speak generalities about sociopathy because I think no one has a complete sample set, so you can't make generalities yet.
I agree.
But one of the generalities that seems to be made is that sociopaths tend to define themselves more by what they want than, I don't know what the hell else you would define yourself by, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, really, I don't understand why people don't admit to themselves that most of their behavior is driven by what they want. Um,
Yeah, I think that that's a
and
really
at least
interesting.
I guess I feel honest about it, you know.
Well, I think it's really good. I mean, self honesty is like the first step. So I think I'll kind of give you like a little bit of an example of what I think normal people mean by be yourself. Are you
Sure.
ready for that? Is that okay? So I've
Yeah.
used this before with other people. So if somebody says, okay, I have a choice to make and it's either between being honest or not being honest, like a normal person might say, okay, well, I'm an honest person, I identify as
Oh,
being an honest person, yes. So because I'm an honest person, I will choose honesty, and in doing so they're self-expressing actually,
right.
like so they're constantly self-expressing in their choices because they're choosing from a place of identity. And then somebody who's so I would could say that that's kind of process oriented. You're a particular person, so you're choosing the process without regard to the outcome. And then I would
Uh-huh.
say that we tend to be very almost exclusively outcome oriented, to
Yep.
where the Excel spreadsheets would be like, okay, well, if I tell the truth, what result? And if I tell a lie, what result? and
Right.
factor in whatever you care about or whatever yours is your reality. So for you, you'd factor in your Christian beliefs, right? And somebody else who doesn't have Christian beliefs wouldn't factor those in, or whatever else. And it's just, it's not going to lead to the same result always. It's just going to be the perfect outcome for you, or the best outcome for you given the circumstances,
Right.
right? Exactly as you said, like if you have kind of two bad choices, well, okay, you have two bad choices, right? It's not going to be a great outcome, but it's going to be the less bad outcome. And that's mostly what you're choosing. Does that sound kind of like the process that you go through when you're like making a choice?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In my immediate reaction to your question about which choice to make was, well, which one gets me what I want, right?
Right.
And back to the other question you were asking, because I think this kind of answers part of that, is the question: are there any other places where I feel the ability to be myself with the least, I think, with the least amount of filters, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, and I don't want to get too much into it at all, but I feel like I have the ability to do that at work with
Yeah.
my particular team of coworkers. I can be myself with the least amount of filters, and they happen to value that. So it works really well. And actually, that's been a really valuable thing for me, because it allows me a flex and a relief valve, so that whenever I need to flex my, whenever I'm feeling especially, pathological, or especially, whatever, um, I have that ability to express that in a trusted environment. That's been pretty valuable.
So it's really interesting you use the word relief valve. What do you mean by that?
No, I think it goes back to the filters. You're
Mm.
constantly working filters. You're constantly working those programs to try and make sure that you're following or conforming with all the little social pathways that are required to get stuff done. Whereas in certain environments where people don't mind you being a little less, um, you know, my coworkers have really thick skins, so to speak. So I can speak my mind as directly and as unfiltered as I want, to a degree, or to within certain limitations. And they won't. They're like, oh, cool, yep. And they take it for what it is when I'm trying to say, hey, XYZ is not doing what it needs to. We need to change things. They get that, and nobody feels hurt, right? So so I don't have to put up the pretty face and say, hey, I want to thank you so much for this awesome work you've been doing. Is there any way we can change this little tiny bit? If you do, I know it'll make you look a lot better to the boss. Hey, is that cool? Oh, you know what? I know this is going to take you an extra 15 minutes of time. Hey, let me hook you up with a couple of donuts and some coffee, right? I don't have to do any of that. I'm like, yo, this needs to change. And they're like, oh, yeah, I see. And they're good.
So, but why is that a relief to you? Like what is the difference between like energy expenditure or whatever else that feels good about that to you versus
It's that Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to look at it all the time.
say that again?
Did I lose you?
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it's the Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to
Uh,
look at it all the time. You don't have to burn your brain running programs. It's kind of nice.
yes. So do you experience the burning of the brain?
Yeah, sometimes, especially at cocktail parties.
Yeah. Yeah, man, what do I call it? The brain eats itself.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit.
Have you ever, like in an Excel spreadsheet, have you ever done this like in an actual Excel spreadsheet, not these analogous ones we've been talking about, but where there's like a loop, there's like a feedback loop in there, and the formula is not working because it's just like trying to process
I
something.
used to do that a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, you get that too in sound, right? You get that feedback loop or whatever. That's what I kind of mean. The brain eats itself because it's just
Yeah.
constantly taking in information. But part of the, yeah, I mean, you're a dynamic person. I'm a dynamic person or something. So part of the information is that too. It's just, it requires so much mental energy. Like, so this, I mean, I asked you a little bit before, I think, do you feel like your tolerance let's say just your pure capacity. Has your capacity diminished at all to be doing these Excel spreadsheets? You definitely said your interest has waned. Has your capacity as well?
No, I think my capacity has actually increased dramatically over the years. I think I just like to focus on quality over quantity.
Hmm. Good for you. So are you probably a little bit
Thanks.
judicious then in like choosing things like uh it almost sounds like you just have you're like the Marie Kondo of, of like eliminating, these sociopath spreadsheets because you're like, well, let's get rid of some of these that aren't really pulling their weight, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's actually probably true.
now, do you feel like at all, that you have, because I've talked to some people who have no pressure, I have no expectation about the answer to this, but do you feel at all like in kind of weeding out some of these Excel spreadsheets that were like overburdensome, let's say, that do you feel like your life has, I mean, it's certainly gotten easier. I can see that. And do you think that it's also lost something, some depth or something? Like you feel like you're retreating from life just a little bit, not engaging with it as much as you would like, or you feel like you're at a good actual balance?
So to draw an analogy, you know how therapists they say, hey, most unhealthy behavior is really just an old coping mechanism that needs to be replaced with a better coping mechanism, right?
Right.
I think analogously, a lot of those old programs, so to speak, need to be replaced with better ones. So, for example, I've noticed lately that I've been really struggling with low-level impulse control. I'm a self-confessed sugar addict. For me, sugar is about as addictive as cigarettes, uh, and and so I'm constantly battling, the cravings for just binging on sugar. And there are these weird moments when I just have no impulse control at all, and you get me near sugar, and and I'll just consume it until, a lot. Like, I'll go through a pack of Oreos in 48 hours, and I'm sitting there going, "What in the hell did I just do?" I can't stay. I don't even like what I've done, and it's these little things where those little impulse controls where I used to have a whole lot more impulse control, but somehow I need to replace that with some other program, because
Mm.
somehow that's an example of one that just sort of fell apart.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've talked to other people who seem to suggest that like some of these Excel spreadsheets to get themselves to do things that they wouldn't want to do, like say no to the sugar. They're using willpower. Would you say like how many of your Excel spreadsheets require willpower, and how much willpower do you think that you have to spend basically every day? Like a lot, medium, little.
um yeah, so I think that goes back to what I was talking about, how a lot of these turn into muscle memory.
Mm,
Some of them I've done a good job of kicking back into the I guess you would call it system one thinking, where it's part of a natural reaction. um the ones that I have to keep in the forefront of my mind, there's a lot of will. It depends on the day, but and I'm sure there's a certain behavioral, stressors and triggers and whatever that would require more willpower one day than another. I don't know if I think my willpower is probably about the same. Um, yeah, that's a good question.
and you said that like if something is stressing you out, then yes, you have to kind of like close some Excel spreadsheet windows, let's say.
Yeah, some of them fall apart on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like kind of like actually a lot like a computer, where if you got a lot of programs running and then all of a sudden you run out of CPU processing, certain of the programs will just stop running because it just can't do it.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you we keep referencing these computer analogies for the way our brain works, but
Yes.
I mean, I experience it the same way that the brain feels like software to me, it just feels like or the processes of the brain, the brain
Yeah,
itself I guess is hardware.
yeah, it's an analogy that's got a lot to it.
And so this is kind of a little bit related, but maybe it's not for you. You know, just some people I've talked to, they've had times in which the processes shut down in a way that's really inconvenient and, let's say, kind of self-destructive. Like they end up with like a problem, a pretty big problem because of it. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Hmm. Hmm. That's a good question. Uh, let's say that the answer could have been yes if I weren't so good at managing risks and thinking on my feet. So what probably was a potential for risky, dangerous behavior. Maybe I just got lucky and dodged the negative consequences.
Yeah, that's awesome for you. So I think I asked you before, but I think
Thanks.
we kind of got distracted. But when did you start thinking this way? Can you remember when, or was there a time before?
When, which way?
Like Excel spreadsheets, risk management.
Oh, probably as early as, those are those things you start in your childhood. I was just talking with a friend about how when I was a kid, I remember I was at least I was 9 or 10 years old when I started learning how to lie to people. Not because, and I got good at lying because for some weird reason, people didn't believe me when I told the truth. I think, if I remember correctly, every once in a while when I did tell the truth, I would kind of have a bit of a grin to my face when I was telling the truth, and people would think that I was lying to them.
Hmm.
And it got so bad that I just started lying to people because they kept accusing me of lying, and so just to get them off my back, I would confess to a smaller, less serious lie, or is less serious, crime or rule breaking, whatever, just to get them to leave me the hell alone, because they just wouldn't believe me when I did tell the truth. I remember that happening when I was, 9, 10 years old, when I became fully conscious that I was doing that deliberately. I think, when I was I don't remember. I don't remember the first time I realized that it was easier to just not get caught. But that seemed to be a best practice that I was fully cognizant of, at least as early as, 10, 11, 12. It was something I was very good at when I was in high school. Um, my one of my friends in high school is a self-confessed sociopath, um, or at least he's on the spectrum in some way. And we did all sorts of stupid stuff, and some of it was probably more dangerous or more serious than other things. um, but what it really came down to was we were smart enough to not get caught. That was like getting caught was the height of stupidity and failure. It was like just terribly unprofessional.
Yeah, it's interesting as you kind of like tell me this story about like telling the truth, but you have a weird facial expression.
Yeah.
Like I suddenly remember this too in my childhood. And then you're right. It's like I had to kind of like lie about it, like to explain why the weird facial expression, because they just would not believe that that was just, my facial expression.
Right.
But I've had other people too, like so I was a music major, right? And
Uh-huh.
I had a conductor once say, like I wish that you could just turn around and watch Emmy's face during this because you would know exactly where it starts to fall apart. Because I have this problem in church too. If there's like somebody saying something weird, or usually most frequently if somebody's doing some sort of musical something in church and it's going off the rails a little
Mhm.
bit, and you're like, oh, okay, and I have to put my face in my hands and just like hide it. I think I
Right.
whatever, I have that kind of face or something that people will feel weird about it. They'll look at my face and be like, these expressions are unusual or something. And I remember always kind of having like a little bit of a problem with that, where people would be like, wipe that smile off your face or something. And I'd be like,
Right.
this seems really aggressive considering I don't even feel like I'm smiling. I don't have like any awareness that I'm smiling.
So I got very good at having a poker face,
Hmm.
in part because half the time when something's happening around me, I don't feel any emotion about it. I just care about the pathway, right? Like I was talking about. I care about the objective. So there's no emotion in the process of interacting with people sometimes. The other reason I have a poker face a lot of times is because I had to learn to straighten my face out when I was telling the truth. And I had to learn, and that's when I also learned, if you straighten your face out when you're lying, you can get away with a lot more, right?
Hmm.
So so I kind of, you hear about these, you hear people talk about, people on the sociopathic spectrum, how they have like dead eyes, or like a dead, their poker face is really, really good or whatever. Um, I wonder, hey, how much of that is just a survival mechanism that's that they've been raised to have because you didn't listen to them when they were telling the truth. I don't know.
This is like a really, really good question. And I apologize again. There's a helicopter in the background. Maybe I won't choose to do this ocean view interview format in the future. I just thought it might be nice this time, but yeah. So, do you think you kind of suggested a couple times something maybe like this? Do you think that that a sociopath child or young adult or adult would be the way that they were, if there wasn't this like pressure to kind of like, straighten their face out and change their behavior to fit these preconceptions of, what somebody telling the truth should look like?
Maybe it's a good way to protect them. you know Maybe that's society's unofficial way of saying, look, dude, you may not actually be able to conform to society, so if you can just fake it enough to pretend to make it, you'll get through life, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's society's way of just giving us giving us a pass.
Yeah, at least telling us how to get through. But and sometimes we say this sometimes with like other races or genders, where people are like, women talk about, oh, I have to
I
like
don't know.
walk to my key or car with my keys in my hand just to punch people or something. Like everybody adapts to a certain extent to society. But would you say most of kind of like this nefarious, like lying, pretending to be something that you're not, do you think that that's a sociopath being their natural self, that they would be that way just normally, or is that in reaction to society?
Well, let's say I think it's a logical premise of saying, if sociopaths are more objective oriented than they are process oriented,
Hmm.
then most of them would perceive lying as nothing more than a pathway to get the objective, right? I don't think there's an inherent desire to lie. I think there's an inherent desire to get what they want.
And why do you think they are?
Or I don't know, man. Sometimes fucking with people is really, really fun,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So we just had a time delay. So,
No worries, go ahead. So I
oh
guess my
no,
question is, why do you think that sociopaths are outcome oriented over process oriented? Like, why aren't we process oriented like everybody else?
no idea. No idea. I don't even understand why someone would want to be process oriented.
Hmm. Man, it's so interesting talking with you. Do you? I mean, we're kind of cutting out a little bit technologically, and I need to go to Chick-fil-A pretty soon.
Sure.
Do you have any like closing thoughts? Anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to kind of talk about, or a question for me, or anything?
Well, I actually had a couple of questions for you, but I don't know if you want to put if you want them recorded or not.
Absolutely. Go ahead and ask them, and I can always say
Okay.
pass.
Okay. Well, so the first one is, are you currently working for your dad?
No, not currently working for my dad. I have my own law practice. And
Okay.
yeah, so I have my own clients, and they know or they don't know and don't care, or they're small enough clients, like the ones that like I'm
Right.
yeah, certain clients that represent like 30-40% of my business or something, right? And those people know and don't care, or know and think it's fine or good or something, so
Okay.
that's really nice. So I do just have like yeah, I think somebody said this was an interesting, I'm glad that you're asking these questions. Somebody said like kind of right after it happened, like she just needs to learn how to do like a service industry, in which people don't need to, she's just producing a product or something, and people don't need to know kind of the background, or they don't need to be able to trust, XYZ or something. And maybe the law in some ways is not that, but in a lot of ways it is. You're just drafting documents, and people that have like any passing familiarity with the law can just look at it and be like, yes, this is a good document. So it's kind of like being a plumber or something. Like people with any sort of passing familiarity would be able to look and be like, yes, this was well done or something. And yeah, that's basically what
Right.
I have done. It's just that. And I trade stocks. Even when I was in law school, I would take out extra money for student loans. It's illegal to put them into the stock market, of course. But what I would do is use them towards tuition and textbooks, as you're supposed to, and then use my own savings to go
Mhm.
into the stock market. So I've been saving since I was like 21, 22. And for whatever reason, it was a really good year in 2020 for the stock market if you're like involved in it. And, like it more than, my account's more than doubled or
Sure.
whatever. So now I'm kind of on the path just because of that and a couple real estate investments to retire, like probably in like 5-ish years. So I kind of am pretty chilled too about like even my
Sure.
professional pursuits, like as long as I can kind of live whatever. And I'm lucky to have really great friends, like I don't actually live on the beach right now. I'm staying at a friend's house. He has a guest house, and he lives just like, a few minutes walk from where I am currently or whatever. So that's nice. It's nice to like just live there for free and kind of not have to worry about certain expenses. And so yeah, because you mentioned, I think you mentioned that you were like, did this ruin your life? And
Yeah, I
I
was curious about, I apologize. I'm curious about your reinvention experience, and if you took advantage of this, of the exposure to, just go reinvent yourself.
yeah. So I mean the kind of long answer to this, because I know people want to know, about just like the pragmatics, but like the long answer to this is like, I am now at a place that I could not have orchestrated to. Like, orchestrated, like planned out with my Excel spreadsheet. It's been like, okay, I'm totally outcome oriented and this is where I want to end up. Because I have just learned, and this is like no knock on people who are outcome oriented, but I've learned to be process oriented almost exclusively, and to follow my own intuition and kind of like a spiritual guidance. And I feel like that has been the main shift, is that rather than kind of be concerned all the time about what's happening in terms of like outcome, I'm more just concerned about being the truest version of myself, and everything has fallen in place that, better than I could have kind of tried to like, my machinations, or using my strategies to get to. So yeah, my life has like changed dramatically, and I do think that it was in response to suddenly not having those uh, as you said, like when they say that a lot of our issues are caused by kind of mechanisms, defensive mechanisms or otherwise, that we've kind of learned over the years. Like this is a good reaction, to this because it has these benefits or something. But as we go through therapy or other things, then we kind of eliminate the ones that are no longer working. And for
Right.
me, at least, it went from kind of like going from not having like hardly any sense of self or my own identity to having, or that of other people, to having a very robust one. And again, it's not like a knock on like whoever, I see psychopaths in like the playground stage, what I call the playground stage, and I'm like, good for them, they're like living their best lives. Like they truly are living a life that like anybody would be jealous of, like just living, from moment to moment, totally carefree, totally in the moment, totally, just having fun with life. And, I don't have any judgment for that, nor do I have any judgment for any other way that people choose to live.
Sure. That you mentioned something about spirituality, and I did have that as a secondary question,
Mm-hmm.
which was, so for me, I tend to define spirituality by, I guess I would call it the 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 truth and reality that is part of the universe, that the part of the universe that cannot be, that's real, but cannot be necessarily validated through empirical means. And so by not being able to have some other way to describe it, we use the term spirit.
Hmm.
I'm curious about your experience with um, with with spirituality in that sense.
Yes.
Have
So
I don't even know what the right more context. Yeah, keep going.
yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever said this on a Zoom. So I think there are kind of two aspects to that. There's like the religiosity, I guess is how we say it, and there's kind of like the spirituality, like how it like might show up in my day to day life. So like Mormonism, a lot of people ask me like, how could you kind of believe in Mormonism being a sociopath? And I tell them, well, like Mormonism is maybe not what most people think it is. At least in my perspective, it's more science fictiony. Like imagine that consciousness developed not on this planet, but on another planet, right? Or somewhere else.
Right.
Just somewhere else in the universe there was consciousness. And the Mormons have a term for the type of matter that like develops this particular type of consciousness that we are, and that word is intelligences, right? So we have some like intelligences out there that are developing their consciousness. Like the Mormon belief in like a heavenly father, he's basically just like a gardener for consciousness. Like he developed it, first or something, or fastest, his consciousness, and then evolved. If you've seen the second Guardians of the Galaxy film, there's a character named, I think, Ego. It's Kurt Russell. That basically it's the plot line of that Guardians of the Galaxy. It's very similar, so he just developed consciousness, learned
Yep.
how to
Uh-huh.
manipulate matter, and then he was like, okay, I'm going to also try to help these other intelligences develop consciousness and become like I am. Right. This is like the Mormon theology that we're all meant to kind of develop and progress to eventually become something like God. Right. As advanced as he is with his evolutionary, consciousness and ability to manipulate matter, etc. Right. So he sets up this situation that's essentially like a simulation, right? Which is like this existence, right? And the reason why is it's kind of like college. You're just going to go off to a place and just kind of, rather than it taking a trillion years or something to develop the consciousness that you need, where it's going to take a much shorter time or whatever. So the simulation is kind of structured for these particular ways to have us learn particular lessons. One of the lessons we need to learn is that we are individuals. We're all individuals. We have particular rights, and so we have to respect others' personal boundaries, but also that we're all one with like the universe, and energy is all kind of related, etc. So we kind of have to understand these things. Why do we have to understand these things? Because there was a war in heaven, and we can't all develop and evolve to the point of being gods if we don't have that realization, if we don't have like that internal sense that we can't violate other people's personhood, agency, etc., their personal boundaries, because otherwise there's going to keep being wars in heaven, right? So it's like this very like practical approach to, so when religious people, Christians or Mormons or whatever, talk about damnation, then that's what it just means, that you're going to stop your progression. That like the Heavenly Father character is going to kind of step in and as much as possible just not let you get so powerful unless and until you make these realizations and you've shown kind of like a commitment and an understanding to not violating other people's agency. So that's just Mormonism. The reason why I say it's a simulation is you spoke earlier about the atonement, and the if you kind of take like a particular belief, which I think is pretty common in Christianity, that the atonement, Christ suffered for all sins or whatever, then what that really means is it is kind of like a computer game, in the sense that like you turn it off or whatever, and nothing that happened there, has any lasting consequences except the way that it's influenced you. Like you still have those memories, you still have the way that that computer game has changed you, but then you just unplug it and like whatever happened, you died there, it doesn't matter. You suffered there, you still may have some like lingering memories of that, but it doesn't matter. So that's why it's kind of functionally a simulation, and also a simulation in the sense that it is like a college. It is just like a world that was constructed for this particular purpose of advancing people's consciousness. So that's the religion. That's the religion explanation. And I kind of think that that's plausible. I'm like a belief that I have a belief that this is like a simulation. You can see kind of evidence of it, and you can kind of understand that's at least a plausible thing, and I've just seen kind of other evidences of it that make me still kind of believe in Mormonism. Spirituality, so I talk a lot, especially on the Discord server. If people are interested in joining that, go ahead and shoot me an email about intuition and how I have come to kind of understand two aspects of intuition. There's the kind of the religious one, which we would sometimes call, people might call like a Holy Spirit or something, which is this spiritual presence that can lead you, guide you to make better decisions. But there's also kind of like this intuition that I think is just, kind of like an aesthetic for truth. And the aesthetic for truth is like this individual one. It's like your own personal aesthetic for truth, just like you can have an aesthetic for good art or good wine. You can have this aesthetic for truth, including the truth about your own preferences and your own identity. So I often will consult my intuition, which sometimes might be like a Holy Spirit type person, or sometimes it's just me asking, this aesthetic. The same way like your head might ask your heart, or your heart might ask your head particular questions. You're just asking a part of yourself, is this a good idea? Is this a good idea to take on this particular client? Is this a good idea to file a lawsuit over this particular thing? Is it a good idea to take this route, or should I go to, Six Flags this weekend, or, whatever else? Like I'm probably asking intuition questions like 10, 20 times a day. And so that has really helped me become more process oriented. In fact, I can't even imagine how I would become process oriented without having like this sense of intuition and asking intuition these particular questions.
That's a whole lot.
Yeah.
But it's really valuable. What I think I really appreciate your perspective on this. I also find it really interesting that for you, the way you talk about it, it is it's not just some sort of theoretical legalistic approach to, hey, you're not approaching religion or spirituality the same way that I would approach social pathways, right? You're not just navigating the stars to see if you can get a good result. What
Right.
you're doing is, for you, your relationship with God, in lack of a better term, is very real.
Yes,
Would
I
you
would.
say that?
Yes, I would say it's very real, and I would say that part of it comes from just a change in my understanding. And there's a Mormon scripture that kind of talks about how like we can change our understanding, and truth can distill upon our souls as the dews from heaven. And so it's been something that's been that slow. It's been like truth distilling on my soul as dews from heaven, and to what I've just started to realize that kind of the way that most people think of Christianity is, I don't want to say wrong, but like maybe an incomplete picture, just in my own opinion, just in my own understanding, is that we're not really here to just like jump through hoops, but to kind of understand like this thing that I said to you about like, what are we really trying to do? Yes, we are trying to become like God, but no, we can't have wars in heaven with people like who have all those powers, like it really is kind of this very practical thing. And so it's like you could jump through all the hoops but still not qualify. Like the real thing that you are being asked to do, and like I think Jesus is like a very good representation of this, as compared to all the rules of the Old Testament, is you're just being asked to understand the truth of your own self and the truth of the others around you, which is that you're both individuals and you're also one.
Yeah, that makes sense. And have you seen for yourself? I'm not sure how to ask this question. Have so the sledgehammer version of this question is: have you seen the the teachings of Mormonism make you a better person?
So I would say the teachings of Mormonism, yes, but like all things, like government good or bad? Is religion good or bad? Is, I don't know, ethics good or bad? You could probably make arguments for and against, because it's kind of like, you couldn't say just 100% this or that. And I think understanding that everything is nuance is a part of the religion to me. Is because, I mean, to be Mormon, you have like all these contradictory commandments. And to be Christian too, same thing, right? They're like, you have to be self-sufficient, but also, like they're like, take no person nor script or something and just rely on God all the time. Like you have
Right.
to be good, you have to have these good works, and yet, good works aren't going to merit you anything. It's all about grace or whatever. Like it's quite literally impossible to comply with all of the kind of commandments or suggestions that we get from the Bible, and certainly in whatever Mormon scriptures there are, right? So I think to kind of understand that there's nuance in everything, and it kind of makes sense when you think about it, because we talk about it, it's just like you said, you're like it's difficult to describe what unconditional love felt to you, and it was as different for you as seeing like shadows on the cave, the platonic form, versus like seeing the thing actually in reality, right? So we're trying to, and this is why I think religion is so kind of like both symbolic and very simple. It's so simple that I think people are like, this is stupid. But it's like, well, I mean, like, take back to like however many thousands of years ago we were like humans, right? And then, or hundreds of thousands, millions, who knows, right? Billions, that we were humans. And like, without kind of technology, like, how could they understand this thing I've just told you about planets and consciousness and whatever, Like, you had to kind of use terms that everybody would be able to understand, no matter where they were on this like technological, what do we call it when it like goes, we keep saying this about the pandemic too, it's an exponential curve, right?
Yeah.
So we're in the elbow of an exponential curve. I think most people kind of agree about that with technology in terms of technological increases. And so let's say you kind of knew you were like this God who's creating this world, right? You knew, okay, this is how fast they're going to solve these technological problems, right? So, we're dealing with a window of X number of years, right? And then they'll get so far beyond or something that stuff is going to start getting squirrely or whatever. And then he's like, okay, so this is basically the window. We have like this set number of years that people are going to be able to like come down and do this without them kind of like developing past this kind of like primitive existence. And you'd have to start them pretty primitive, in order for them to like not be further along the curve. If you want it to be a little bit longer, then they have to start off more primitive, right? That's just kind of like, these are just the realities. Like if you were designing this and you had these kind of strictures for like, okay, we want a world that looks like this, and the experience, is felt like this, and they'll be able to, make these realizations and learn these lessons without having like these lasting consequences. These are just kind of like problem solving tools that they've come up with or whatever. So I think kind of when you like realize that this is just kind of like what it's about, I kind of forget what your question was now, but you're just like, all right, this makes sense to me. And now I don't have to worry about, like, because people famously are like, oh, Mormons, no coffee or tea or whatever. And I just ask intuition. I just ask, is green tea okay? I don't
Right.
have to like have these weird kind of questions. Like, have I ever had there? I'm sure there's situations in which alcohol would be okay. I'm sure there's situations in which, like, kind of famously right now, the Mormon church with like homosexuality, and same sex marriage. And it's like, I don't think that that is as clear as most Mormons think it is. I just think that there's like, when you get down to it, what is really so black and white about the universe? Almost nothing. Even light behaves in some ways as a particle, in some ways as a wave. Like, we just like to kind of think you understand what's going on is, I think, the first mistake. I don't think I understand what's going on. These are just my current understandings, and I'm sure that they're going to continue to develop as I keep kind of, as you say, you prune your bad Excel spreadsheets. I prune my bad religious beliefs. I think, okay, I've always had this religious belief that it always has to be X, and I even have like maybe a bad reaction when somebody says, no, it doesn't have to be X. And I'm like, that the person's wrong and they're going to hell or whatever, who knows how, who knows why that happened, that I'm having this bad reaction. But just trying to be like a little bit more open-minded and understanding, when is it always X, has there ever been a situation in the universe in which it's always X?
That was a heck of an answer, and I'm kind of consuming it for myself.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, I'll post this. You
and I
can
think it's really
re-listen.
cool because this particular, what you're really expressing to me is this, I don't know how to say it, but it's an expression of your own journey of being a better person, whether that's being a better sociopath or being a better human being. I don't necessarily know if there's a difference, but I think it's very interesting that for you, having an active and very vibrant spiritual life has been such a powerful vehicle. And it's not a dead vehicle, it's not a fake vehicle. This is a real experience for you.
Oh, absolutely. And kind of getting to this idea of, because I mean, I said earlier, like, I don't think you don't have to be a sociopath, to be a good Christian. And Mormons have like this concept that everything was created and should fulfill the measure of its creation. I love that phrase, fulfill like exactly what it was meant to be, the full measure of its creation, and have joy therein. Like, that is, if you could distill the meaning of life down to one sentence. And that's why I love Mormonism, is because they're hit makers with this sort of stuff. I mean, they are hit makers. Can you like point to me another religion that has like can distill, the whole purpose of everything's existence to that one sentence? Like, wow, like explain to me how they were able to come up with that without like some actual, authority, some actual like shortcut to truth, some, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's I appreciate your perspective on this. I really do.
Yeah. And do you have more questions? I know that was like a long, long answer to those questions you did have.
You know what? Honestly, those were the two biggest things
No
that kind of
worries,
caught my attention.
because we're also just about Chick-fil-A time.
Funny, I had Chick-fil-A myself today. I recommend it.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A is my favorite. I love Chick-fil-A. I could eat there every day, really. That's just a personal preference. That's a very process-oriented thing. Sometimes
Yeah,
they
if
do better than others, but it's still process. It's always going to be Chick-fil-A.
let me know if you get any some positive kickbacks for our product placement here. I wouldn't mind a cut of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Man, I would buy stock in Chick-fil-A, but it's privately traded and it's almost impossible to become a franchisee. So unfortunately, I have no financial
Yeah,
link to
that'll be
them.
your next dream.
Yes, exactly. Anyways, is there anything else you want to like say, do, talk before we end?
No, I really appreciate the direction this whole conversation went.
Okay, good. You were great. Thank you so much for responding with honesty. People say all the time in like comments or emails to me, like, it's just so great to hear people being honest about this for various reasons, either because they are sociopathic or because they know somebody that's being sociopathic. So I want to reiterate to you how much people appreciate people like you coming on and being honest and being like, this is just my experience, for what it's worth. This is just my experience. So I just
Yeah.
want to say thank you again for taking the time to talk to me.